welcome back or welcome to my channel. My name is Ren, and on this channel I talk about books and pop culture, and this video is actually also going to exist in podcast format. So for everyone that's listening as a podcast, welcome to the Talk Bookish to Me podcast. I am your host Ren, and this podcast is going to be all things bookish. If you're watching visually or if you're listening but want to watch visually, you can come check out my YouTube channel, which is at Ren Francis. It'll be in all of the descriptions, and my video formats will be going up and you can watch them, and they will be subtitled as well. But yeah, I've wanted to do a bookish podcast for a while, and I have a Stranger Things podcast and I have a lot of fun with it. That will also be in links in descriptions, and I wanted to do a bookish one because I talk about books online and it just felt very natural start a bookish podcast. So for the very first episode of the Talk Bookish to Me podcast, I thought I would talk about 5 ways you can refresh your reading in 2024, especially if you are in a reading slump and you're feeling a little bit unmotivated after reading last year. I think this time of year can be quite daunting. We go online and we see lots of people talking about their reading goals and how many books they read last year and how many books they've already read despite only being a couple of days into January. And I feel like it can, whilst good because everyone gets to share their reading with everyone, it can also be quite intimidating, especially if you are feeling that little bit unmotivated. So, and I have felt that the last few years. I've been very honest about my mental health the last couple of years, and unfortunately part of the reason why I took a break from making content is because you cannot make content about books when you're not reading books, and I was not reading. My reading only really got better July of 2023. So I have spent the last few years feeling really unmotivated and not really reading a lot. So here's ways that I tried to help myself and things that I found worked in order to kind of refresh myself and refresh my reading and get myself into the reading spirit again. The first one is those books that you were reading last year that you're finding really sluggish, that you're struggling to get through, that are putting you in a reading slump. DNF them. Get rid of them. Close them. Don't try and finish them. Do not bring the book that is making you hate reading into 2024. DNF it. Life is too short to read books that aren't good. Life is too short to read books that you are not vibing with. Once I realised that and became a little bit more brutal with my DNFing, everything changed. It genuinely changed the game for me. And I'm not saying that you have to DNF them forever. There are different categories of DNFing. You can DNF something and put it straight in the charity box, or you can DNF something and put it back on your shelf and go back to it at a later date. And I tend to find that you know what type of DNFing that is. Like, if you are struggling to get through a book because it is a really bad book, charity box it. If you're struggling to get through a book but you know it's something that you should be enjoying, the problem is more likely your attitude towards reading at the moment and your own mental kind of view on it. Like I've said the last few years, how I've struggled. So you DNF them and you just put them back on your shelf. They just go back on your shelf in a little place, and you can go back to them at a later date. There is no reason why you can't return to it. Bringing in that negativity, bringing in that sluggishness isn't going to help you. You're just going to be still feeling tied down to the same book that was making you unmotivated in December. And it's just not going to help when it comes to your reading goals. You will spend the majority of January trying to get through it, and when you finish it, you're not going to feel like picking up another book because you're just going to feel really towards reading. Honestly, if you're reading a book right now and you are not vibing with it, DNF it. You can come back to it if you want, but DNF it for now. It's okay. It can go on the shelf. It's not going anywhere, but you can take a break from it. I feel like you need to kind of start anew if that's how you're feeling. My second point is shop your shelves. TBRs are intimidating. They are. My TBR is so high that I didn't realise that there are people in the world that actually have attainable TBRs. What's that like? Because I don't know. My TBR is a lot of books, and as much as I enjoy buying books, I certainly buy more then I read. And that is something that I want to work on. And as much as it's nice to go in and buy yourself a little book, when you come back and you add to that TBR, reading, it becomes more intimidating. You know, the bigger the TBR, the more intimidating reading can feel. And I think that that's just natural for everyone, regardless if your TBR is attainable in a year or if it's going to take you a little bit longer. So one thing that I find really helpful is to, instead of shopping in the bookstore, shop on my shelves. There are enough books on my shelf that I haven't read that shopping them is genuinely really fun and really helpful. So I will like rearrange them and I'll discover books that I was really excited to read that when it came out and I never got around to it. I will have a look at shelves that I don't see as often, so shelves that are like really at the bottom, because I've got like a beanbag in the way of one of my shelves, so there's books there that kind of just aren't forgotten but are not always visible to me, and I just kind of shop around my shelves, have a rearrange, get a TBR jar and put books from my shelf in it, wrap up books on my shelf, write a little summary of what they are, and wrap them up and then choose them that way. Make your shelves fun. Make your TBR fun. Shop your shelves, not the bookstores for the time being, because I feel like adding to that TBR is just going to feel more intimidating, as fun as it is to go into a bookstore and buy loads of books. One of my resolutions this year is to only buy books from Gaze the Word. I asked for mainly Gaze the Word vouchers for Christmas and everyone delivered, which was lovely. And so I'm going to use them to just mainly shop in Gaze the Word this year, which is good because I'm not there all the time. So it means that I'm not continuously buying and I'm kind of working on the limit of all the vouchers put together, so I have a limit and I don't want to spend it all at once, so it's quite good. So yeah, shopping your shelves is genuinely a really good way to get you out of a slump, because you already have the book there and it's a book that at one point you were excited to read because you bought it, and you wouldn't have bought it if you weren't excited to read it. So I feel like shopping your shelves is a really good way to kind of refresh your reading, remind yourself of what you've got, and go from there and when you're choosing what you want to read. Third one is realistic goals / no goals at all. That will depend on your level of unmotivation toward reading. If your motivation is at a complete zero, I genuinely would recommend not setting any goals, because it's just going to feel even more intimidating. I feel like you have to go back to basics and just read when you want to read and kind of assess your reading as the year goes on. If you are feeling like you do want to set a goal and you feel like that's something that's helpful, but you're still feeling that little bit unmotivated, setting a goal of like 100 books is just not going to do you any favors. More often than not, that's just going to feel even worse. You're going to end up behind because you're already feeling a little bit more unmotivated, and then you will feel worse because you are not on track. Especially if you are using an app like Goodreads where you are tracking your progress, it will tell you if you are behind, and that's not helpful. As I have learned, it very, very quickly makes me feel even worse. And then I end up either changing my goal, which makes me feel even worse. I end up not updating everything because that makes me feel worse. And I just end up in an even worse reading slump than I was in originally. And it doesn't help. So I feel like when you are in that kind of mindset, you do have to start small, and you can go over your reading goal. If you set a goal of like 15 books and then you end up reading 60 books, you can go over that. That's okay. Like, you can 100% go over it. But I feel like goal setting is helpful, but you have to be in the right mindset to achieve a goal. So setting a goal in the wrong mindset is just going to make you feel worse. So I would really, really recommend thinking about the goal that you want to set, or if you want to set a goal, and being a little bit more realistic with it to apply to your current attitude towards reading. Otherwise, again, you're just going to feel worse. And all of these things, when they make you feel worse, they just make you feel worse about reading. And that's something you don't want. The fourth thing is to change up your format. Audiobooks are an option for people that can listen to audiobooks. That can be really fun because you can incorporate them in aspects of your life where you wouldn't necessarily be reading. So if you're cleaning, you wouldn't be holding a book while cleaning, but you can listen to an audiobook while cleaning, and that's helpful. You can change up the format. Ebooks as well. I genuinely find that with ebooks, people do tend to read faster. I want to make a whole video about this, and well, it'll be a whole podcast episode because I find it really interesting that it happens so often. But people do tend to find that reading an ebook is a little bit less intimidating. You don't see the size of the book on the Kindle, you know, it's a little bit more hidden. It doesn't feel as intimidating. If you pick up a book that's 1,000 pages, you're not looking at the size of it the entire time. You're just looking at a screen. Every book looks the same because it's all on the same device, and it's genuinely, I feel like it kind of just makes the reading process, it can make it a little bit easier. So an e-reader, ebooks feel, you know, they switch it up a little bit if you are finding that physical books are something which is difficult and something that you are struggling with right now. I always read an ebook of books that are massive. I genuinely do. Like it honestly means that I get through it and I feel so much less intimidated, and I'm not looking at the page numbers thinking, this book is massive, when am I going to get through it? I find that I just get through it so much quicker because those are things that I'm not thinking about. And when you're feeling unmotivated, that, like, the size of a book, it's just intimidating. Like, you don't want to look at a 1,000-page book when you're in a reading slump and be like, yay, you know, it doesn't work. And then my fifth tip, which is always my go-to when you are in a reading slump and you want to refresh your reading and find your love for reading, reread a favorite book. Genuinely, 9 times out of 10, I think this works. I think that this is a brilliant way to help when refreshing reading, because if you know that this is something that you love and that this is something that makes you really happy, and this is something that, like, you already know the characters, you already know the story, it's not something that you need to try and learn from scratch, it feels so much easier to get yourself into it. One of the ways that I got back into reading big time last year was I reread Red, White and Royal Blue probably about 10 times in multiple different formats. I would listen to clips of the audiobook on loud as possible when I was going to sleep. My mum came into my room one morning and the audiobook was just blaring, because obviously I need it as loud as possible because I am partially deaf. So, but obviously my parents are not partially deaf, so for them it was very, very loud. I knew the characters, I knew the story, it wasn't something I had to learn, and it was a book that had made me so happy, and it really kind of made me remember why I loved reading so much, and that I loved clicking and connecting with these characters and with stories and seeing the way that Casey McQuiston writes. I just kind of fell in love with it so much. And then that made me want to read more. And then I read similar books. I kind of went from Red, White and Royal Blue to books that were similar, and then eventually was able to re-expand my reading into other genres and other things. And that was so helpful. And I genuinely do feel like if you are looking to refresh your reading and to get out of a reading slump, rereading a favorite book is one of the best ways to do that. You don't really have to think about it as much. You will find things that you like, it reminds you of what you love, and there was so much in Red, White and Royal Blue that rejigged that love. It just puts you back in that mindset and you remember how much you loved it, and then you want to keep connecting to different characters and different stories. And I loved, like, I find it so helpful, and I just think rereading a fave. I also find, this is a kind of bonus one but sort of similar, that rewatching movies of adaptations that I love. So I do this a lot with The Hunger Games. So The Hunger Games is one of my favourite movie adaptations of a book series that I adore, and whenever I rewatch The Hunger Games, also Lord of the Rings, it puts me back into that mindset that I had when I was reading them, and then it makes me want to read more similar. It makes me want to read more that are similar. So that as well is something that kind of ties in and I find really helpful. I just think kind of reintroducing yourself to books that you love and characters that you love to get that spark back so that you can go on to read other books. It's really helpful. So yes, that was my 5 tips for refreshing your reading for 2024. Like I said, you see all of these posts about reading goals and how people reached their reading goals last year, and it can feel really intimidating when you see people that are reading like 200, this was one that read 200 books. And it is a lot, like it's a lot to kind of think, oh my God, and you do kind of feel a little bit like you're not reaching these imaginary goals, but these goals are just put in place by people, you know, that everybody's different, everyone has different responsibilities and different lives and different abilities. Like my mental health has been in such an awful place that I was not in the mindset to read the same way that other people were. You know, now it's better, but it wasn't for so long. And I think that it's kind of important to remember that everyone is individual and to try not to put too much pressure onto it. Reading is supposed to be fun. That's why we read. That's why we read. Like, this is why we share our love for books. This is why we talk about books, because reading is supposed to be something that's fun. And if we do things that make it not fun, if we try and make it a competition, if we try and live up to other people, then it becomes not fun, and then you lose something which you really love. And I think that's why people fall out of their love for reading, is because of things like this. Here's some ways to try and refresh your reading. Remember to go at your own pace, to have your own circumstances and your own life as well. Just have that in mind. Think about what you can do, what's within your means, and focus on your reading, not everyone else's. If you guys have any tips as well, feel free to leave them in the comments on the video version of this and let everyone know, and kind of share your tips for refreshing and revamping your reading. I hope you guys liked this video. Like I said, if you guys are new here, I make videos a couple of times a week about books and pop culture. So if you want to stick around and join us, then you can hit that subscribe button and the little notification bell. If you are listening to the podcast version of this, please give me a follow on the podcast platform that you're listening on. I'd really appreciate it. It really helps. So, you know, give me a like and give me a follow. Yeah, if you're watching the video, go and subscribe to my Talk Bookish to Me podcast. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you're doing really, 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 really well, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.